You're the Attorney General of the United States. We have rules here.
You're obsessed with him.
You're the Attorney General of the United States.
We're obsessed with Donald Trump.
Because this is the Attorney General of the United States whose job is law enforcement. We've never had a witness who has misunderstood our rules and been unable to conform his or her conduct to our rules before.
Representative Jamie Raskin confronted Attorney General Pam Bondi about President Trump suing his own government for $10 billion, potentially violating the Constitution's Domestic Emoluments Clause. When Bondi repeatedly refused to follow committee rules, interrupting and deflecting, Raskin had to explain basic hearing procedures to the Attorney General. He demanded a joint task force to investigate crimes against Epstein survivors.
Article 2, Section 1, Clause 7 of the Constitution is the Domestic Emoluments Clause. And it says that the president is limited to his salary in office and cannot receive any other money from the federal government while he's in office. It cannot be increased by $1. This president is the first president in U.S. history who has repeatedly sued the federal government for $230 million for the judicial search warrant at Mar-a-Lago, which was perfectly lawful and was never struck down. But now he's suing the IRS for $10 billion. He's suing the IRS for $10 billion, which I think is around 80% of its annual budget, because his tax returns were leaked, and they were illegally leaked by a private contractor who actually is in prison now, Charles Littlejohn, but he wants $10 billion. Now, I want to ask you the question of whether you think it would violate the Domestic Emoluments Clause for you to settle that $10 billion case or any of the other claims that the president's made against the government. He himself has remarked, it's interesting because I'm the one that makes the deal, right? And he says, I kind of have to work it out with myself. Do you think it would violate the Domestic Emoluments Clause for the president to work out a deal from people who are his subordinates under his unitary executive theory to get money in one of these cases?
I'm not going to discuss pending litigation.
Okay, so theoretically you're saying because his privacy rights were violated in that tax case, and they were. I'm with the president on that. I mean, his Mar-a-Lago thing is ridiculous, but there's no doubt that his tax returns, despite the fact that he promised to release them, despite the fact that every other president released the tax returns, he suffered embarrassment when it showed that he hadn't paid taxes for several years, and he had a right for that not to happen. Now, I want to turn back to the Epstein survivors, because President Trump may have been a little bit embarrassed by the release of those tax returns. How much do you think the claims of these survivors are worth? As the good congressman from Kentucky just pointed out, there were lots of survivors who had decided, for reasons of their own, never to release their names. That determination was represented to people in Congress, and we built it into our federal law that their names could not be released, and yet you published their names, their phone numbers, their addresses, personally identifying information. If Donald Trump can get $10 billion theoretically from the Department of Justice, how much should these people get for a far worse violation of their privacy rights and a far greater danger established to them in their lives?
Do you even know who Chase Mulligan is? You're so obsessed with, you don't, do you?
I'm going to teach you the rules again. You're the Attorney General of the United States. We have rules here.
You're obsessed with him.
You're the Attorney General of the United States.
We're obsessed with Donald Trump. You have Trump derangement syndrome.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like my time
Mulligan
restored. I'd like my time restored.
In your district. In your district, and you don't even know about it, about keeping children safe from online predators.
Time belongs to the gentleman from Maryland. Gentleman can proceed.
Yeah, and I want the whole country to look at this, because this is the Attorney General of the United States whose job is law enforcement. We've never had a witness who has misunderstood our rules and been unable to conform his or her conduct to our rules before. We have only 5 minutes, and so we use our time to ask you specific questions.
How long are you giving me to answer?
Excuse me, I'm not yielding to you right now. I'd like that second restored too. So, Ms. Bondi, the way it works is we ask you a question and you answer it. And if you go off on a wild goose chase, another tangent, you start reading statistics or you start talking about stuff going on in our district. And by the way, I invite you to my district. Come to my district, but that's not what we're here to do today. Okay? So, and you do that, then we're allowed to say we reclaim our time. At that point, you have to be quiet. You have no choice. You got to be quiet. So I hope you understand the rule of this part. Now, here's what I want to ask you. You're in law enforcement. We've seen all kinds of evidence of crimes. And when we go over to the Department of Justice for the 4 computers for every member of Congress, we see more evidence of crimes. Will you create a joint task force of the Department of Justice and governors and state attorney generals and district attorneys across the country to investigate the crimes that have taken place against these victims and more than 1,000 like them? The DOJ is not doing its job. Will you create a task force with state and local law enforcement to make that happen?
Raskin cited Article 2, Section 1, Clause 7 of the Constitution, which limits the president to his salary and prohibits him from receiving any other money from the federal government while in office. President Trump has become the first president in American history to sue the federal government repeatedly he leads, filing a $230 million claim for the lawful Mar-a-Lago search warrant, and now seeking $10 billion from the IRS, approximately 80% of its annual budget, because his tax returns were illegally leaked by a private contractor now imprisoned. The constitutional problem is stark. Trump himself acknowledged the absurdity, remarking, "It's interesting because I'm the one that makes the deal, right? And I kind of have to work it out with myself." This is precisely what the Domestic Emoluments Clause was designed to prevent, a president enriching himself from the federal treasury. When Raskin asked whether settling these claims would violate the clause, Bondi refused to answer, claiming she wouldn't discuss pending litigation. Raskin then pivoted to a devastating comparison. Trump may have been embarrassed by his leaked tax returns, which showed he hadn't paid taxes for several years, despite promising to release them voluntarily. While Raskin acknowledged Trump's privacy was violated, he posed a fundamental question. If Trump can theoretically receive $10 billion from the DOJ for his embarrassment, how much should Epstein survivors receive for the far worse violation of their privacy rights? These survivors had specifically chosen never to release their names for their own safety. Congress recognized this in federal law, which requires their identities to be protected. Yet Bondi's Department of Justice published their names, phone numbers, addresses, and personally identifying information, creating not just embarrassment, but genuine danger to their lives. If monetary damages are appropriate for Trump's leaked tax returns, the survivors deserve compensation orders of magnitude greater. At this point, Bondi completely abandoned appropriate witness decorum. She lashed out at Raskin, accusing him of being obsessed with Trump and having Trump derangement syndrome, a shocking breach of protocol for any witness, let alone the Attorney General of the United States. Raskin's response was measured but firm, noting that, "This is the Attorney General of the United States whose job is law enforcement. We've never had a witness who has misunderstood our rules and been unable to conform his or her conduct to our rules before." He then patiently explained the basic structure of congressional hearings. Members ask questions. Witnesses answer them. If witnesses go off on tangents, members reclaim their time, and the witness must stop speaking. This is not complex, yet Bondi repeatedly violated this basic procedure. Raskin's final question cut to the core mission of the Department of Justice. He noted that committee members had seen extensive evidence of crimes in the Epstein files, including through computers available at DOJ facilities. The evidence is overwhelming, yet prosecutions are non-existent. His proposal was straightforward. Create a joint task force of the Department of Justice working with governors, state attorneys general, and district attorneys to investigate crimes committed against more than 1,000 victims. This was not radical, but a basic law enforcement coordination mechanism used routinely for complex crimes. The fact that it required a congressional demand rather than being the DOJ's own initiative revealed the department's fundamental failure. This exchange exemplified everything wrong with the current administration's approach to justice. The president enriches himself through lawsuits against his own government, while the Constitution forbids it. Victims whose privacy was protected by law are exposed, yet receive no remedy. The Attorney General cannot follow basic procedures and lashes out at questioners. And most fundamentally, the Department of Justice refuses to pursue powerful criminals whose wealth and connections should make them easier to investigate and prosecute.